What is democratic socialism? We hear Bernie Sanders and others use this. What does that mean?
Well, let's start with what socialism is.
All right.
Socialism means that the state is going to control the means of production, the land, the labor, and the capital are going to be run by the government, a central plan of some kind. Now, if you want to attach democratic in front of that, then the idea, I suppose, is that you're going to have some democratic system, voting politicians, who will elect central planners. Now, that's actually where the problem comes in. Because once you centralize economic control in the hands of a few people, and that's what socialism inevitably and by definition does, then how do you have millions and millions of people influencing? It doesn't actually work. And so it's been tried. The greatest example in the modern era of democratic socialism is probably Venezuela. Chavez was elected in by all accounts, a free and fair election. He instituted a new constitution and started his Bolivarian socialist revolution. They nationalized industries, price controls, all of the things that go with socialism. And what happened? As inevitably it's happened every time socialism has been tried, that concentration of power, that concentration of economic control in the hands of a few, they couldn't keep the democracy side. And they end up using the power of the state to hammer down on their political opponents, the media, the independent journalists, independent professors, and all sorts of people in the other political parties. So that's the problem, is that you can try it for a minute, and it has been tried, but there's an internal contradiction. Centralizing control over the entire economy inevitably means that you're not going to be able to maintain a democratic, free, and open political system.
Socialism isn't democratic isn't a magic phrase to put in front of socialism that makes it not socialism. As a result, and Hayek pointed this out on The Road to Serfdom years ago, that you can't have meaningful democratic freedom without your economic freedoms too. And when people point to places like and say this is successful democratic socialism, like Sweden, well, they've got a problem. And in fact, in Socialism Sucks, our chapter on Sweden is called Not Socialism, because Sweden isn't socialist. The government doesn't own the major means of production in Sweden. Instead, the government is too big. It's got a big welfare state. It's got high taxes. And we think there's problems with that. But we shouldn't conflate it with socialism. The type of big welfare state and high taxes that Sweden have will slow down its rate of growth, but it doesn't impoverish you and get rid of democracy the same way that actually nationalizing the major means of production does.
So in these true socialist projects, first of all, there is no pure socialism. It's impossible, isn't it?
Well, in fact, actually, when you look around the world, pure capitalism or pure socialism doesn't exist in its purest form anywhere. Everything's on this scale. And even in our very capitalistic countries, there's government regulations that impede private property and markets. There's some nationalized industries or state provision of things. And same on the socialist end.
But let me ask you this, Professor. But the aggressive pursuit of socialism is an aggressive pursuit of a police state. The aggressive pursuit of capitalism is the progressive pursuit, ultimately, of increased liberty. Isn't that a big difference?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Don't get me wrong here.
Right.
We're both in favor of pushing as far down that capitalist road as we can go. But when we look around the world...
But for the audience, I want them to understand that, capitalism is a good thing. Socialism is a bad thing. And so an aggressive pursuit of socialism is an aggressive rejection of liberty, and an aggressive pursuit of capitalism is an aggressive embrace of liberty.
Yeah, capitalism is just embracing people's liberty for consenting acts between adults. Any market exchange is okay as long as people mutually agree to it. This is freedom, this is liberty. Socialism takes that away, and ultimately you are part of the means of production that the government's going to control, and they're going to tell you how to use your labor and how to interact in the economy. That's the opposite of freedom.
Let me ask you this, though. Inequality, imperfection, the rich, the poor, capitalism versus socialism. What's your take on that?
Well, so socialists, that's been their selling point. Their selling point from Marx, from the very, very beginning, the selling point for socialists has been, give us the power, we will centralize the control of the economy, and we will deliver not only good economic performance, which is a lie, but we'll also deliver equality. And that's been the selling point. And equality, I have to say, isn't on its surface a horrible sounding concept. I more or less, all things being equal, think equality is a nice thing. The problem is they don't actually deliver it. It's an empirical lie. What socialism gives you, if it gives you anything at all, it'll give you sameness. And this is one of the things we discovered in some of our travels. When you go to a socialist country like Cuba today, you get two types of beer. The meals at every restaurant are basically the same. Just the day drudgery of things. Now, there's a certain equality in it, in the sense that we're all going to be eating the same meals. We're all going to be having the same products available in the stores. But there's going to be no variety available. So it's a type of equality that I think it's called sameness, that is not the kind of equality that most of us would really want to have. And so one of the things that I think when we have this conversation about equality is, let's separate what the socialists claim they can give us. They claim they can give us equality, but what they're actually going to give us, and what they have given us when it's been tried, has been a dreary sort of sameness of life. Everybody gets whatever the government says. You're going to get what I get. I'm going to get what you get. And that's not really what equality means to me.
As you point out in your book, how many new cars are there in Cuba?
Well, new cars?
Yeah. Any?
Essentially zero, yes. Yeah.
I mean, you're basically 1957 Chevys.
Well, or if you're lucky, you might find a 1990s Peugeot from France. Now, a 1990s Peugeot, Mark, is a terrible car. It was a terrible car the day it was made, but it's a terrible car. And in Cuba, these cars will sell for $30,000 because the government won't let anybody import cars. And if you don't let anybody import, supply and demand. If you limit the supply, prices go up.
Let me ask you this, but what about the human spirit and creativity and productivity and the invention of things that help people, whether it's technology or medicines and so forth and so on, in a society that promotes uniformity?
Yeah, it kills the human creativity. Ultimately, humans are the ultimate resource. It's our creativity, but that creativity needs the liberty to flourish. You can see it side by side. We're talking about Cuba and sameness and the bland Cuban food. You know, when Bernie says, why do you need 17 types of deodorant? People say, oh, I don't know about that. Well, try eating the same meal again and again and drinking the same beer. That's constrained human creativity. But those same Cubans 90 miles away make delicious food in Miami. A Cuban sandwich in Miami is great. A Cuban sandwich in Cuba is ham and cheese that's old and kind of cruddy. When the Cubans are given their liberty, they do wonderful things with it. Instead, it's stifled on that island.